Well, Treasury announces the appointment of Mark Kinnan as the acting SARS Commissioner. Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille's fight for her political career intensifies as her disciplinary hearing starts. Hundreds of commuters have been left stranded in Ekurhuleni due to a taxi strike.
There's been so much noise and people have actually forgotten that there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's such a great test series actually happening.
With the decision of Kagiso Rabada's two-match test ban appeal still to be finalised, he's the third player to be sanctioned by the ICC in the current South Africa-Australia series. The Proteas say it's time to put everything aside and focus on the cricket.
Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Newsroom. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Shante Yankees. I'm not alone. Standing by with your sports is Valen. Very happy Tuesday to you, Valen. You good?
I'm very well, thank you. Happy Tuesday to you too, Shante. Good to be with you for today's edition of Newsroom as we bring you all of the sport, which we're going to bring you a full bulletin at 1:45 every hour. Here's Shante with your lead story.
The top story at 9 o'clock, the Treasury has announced that Mark Kinnan has been appointed as the acting SARS Commissioner following the suspension of SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane pending a disciplinary hearing. The presidency said last night that President Cyril Ramaphosa believes it is in the public interest to restore the credibility of the Revenue Service without delay. Well, the president is concerned about the manner in which Moyane handled the matter of his former second-in-command Jonas Makwakwa, who resigned last week. The president is also concerned about the management of VAT refunds, which he had brought SARS into serious disrepute and adversely affected tax morality among taxpayers. Moyane has been under the media spotlight recently for his role in handling millions of rands in VAT refunds to a Gupta-linked company via a third party. Meanwhile, investigative journalist Jacques Poe and the author of The President's Keepers has commended Ramaphosa for suspending Moyane. Well, speaking on Morning Live, Poe says that the move will allow Ramaphosa to rebuild SARS's reputation.
Moyane was definitely on Ramaphosa's hit list, to say it like that. You know, he was appointed by Jacob Zuma in October 2014 without having any tax experience. His highest office in government was that of prisons boss. Now he was a Zuma loyalist, and he stopped the tax investigation into Jacob Zuma. He stopped the tax investigation into the Guptas. He disbanded all 5 investigations units at SARS, leaving the tax service toothless. And he drove a host of dedicated and skilled civil servants from SARS. He failed to collect the taxes of some very notorious criminals. And in the last tax year, SARS reported a 50 billion rand shortfall. Yeah. So Moyane had to go, and he had to go quickly.
Yeah, wasn't easy though. He was refusing to go. I mean, he dug in his heels and absolutely felt like he was going nowhere. At one point, you almost felt like he was untouchable until last night. That was.
Well, he was certainly untouchable under Jacob Zuma. You know, since October 2014, he's virtually destroyed and hollowed out the Revenue Service, and he was definitely untouchable under Jacob Zuma. But you know, there has been evidence against Moyane now for more than a year that he was complicit in covering up the antics of Jonas Makwakwa, his second in command. And I think by doing that, he opened himself to suspension. You know, the Commissioner of SARS is arguably the most crucial civil servant in South Africa. I mean, this is the organization that has to fill the fiscus, that enable the state to pay out 17 million social grants. So Moyane had to go. He's number 2. Makwakwa is also gone, and Cyril Ramaphosa can now start rebuilding the tax revenue service.
Well, managing partner of Amabungane says Tom Moyane's suspension is a clear indication that President Cyril Ramaphosa is serious about dealing with state capture allegations. Samsel was speaking on Morning Live this morning.
Apparently, he threatened to interdict this move, but the commissioner is appointed by the president, and so I think President Ramaphosa was within his rights to suspend Tom Moyane. We'll have to see if he continues the fight or he goes quietly. But I think this is a significant move from the president.
Yeah. What disciplinary proceedings will Moyane actually be facing?
That I'm not 100% sure of. I mean, I assume the president has laid out the basis for his loss of confidence. And it depends whether Mr. Moyane is going to stay and fight. But I think the important thing is that his appointment was really seen as being based on a political mandate. He came to SARS. He swept out the top management, and as in the case of Mr. Makwakwa. He was seen as protecting people close to former President Zuma, and I think this move by President Ramaphosa to get rid of one of the top bureaucrats in a key institution like SARS is important in terms of moving the ship of state to a different direction.
You know, one of the I think many people and articles this morning coming out and describing this move from our president by getting rid of Tom Moyane as I think one of the biggest moves when it comes to trying to rid this country of state capture, because Tom Moyane being very much so involved in state capture, if reports and allegations are anything to go by, somebody who has captured an institution that's always had a very, very good reputation, and yet its reputation has been tainted over these last months at the behest of some incredible staff members, including even seeing at the time the finance minister being removed there. We're talking Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, who's back in a different capacity now. So, I mean, there was a lot happening during that time when Tom Moyane was there. I mean, just remind us of some of the instances.
Look, I think one of the features of the Zuma presidency was Zuma's capture and control of the security institutions, and that included SARS. After the capture of the Hawks and the police and the intelligence services, SARS was one of the last institutions with the powers to, in a sense, go after the president and the president's friends. And we've seen in Jacques Pauw's book, The President's Keepers, that his belief is that one of the major reasons for Moyane being brought in and the top echelon of SARS exiting at that time was because SARS was starting to go after the president around his taxes. They were starting to investigate the Guptas. They were starting to investigate other allies of the president. So there's an enormously powerful position. And I think this is an indication of President Ramaphosa's determination to cut the head off the state capture project.
Well, the chairperson of the DA's federal executive, James Self, says the disciplinary hearing against Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille will go ahead with or without her today. Well, Self's comments come after de Lille insisted that the process be opened to the public and the media, and said that she was prepared to go to court for the hearing to be open. Well, Self says de Lille's case is an internal party matter.
We are a voluntary organisation. We have a constitution, we have rules of practice. Those rules of practice and the constitution were in place when Patricia de Lille became a member. She served on the federal executive for many years. She was aware of what the rules were, so I don't understand why she now wants to change the rules. But be that as it may, The ordinary position is that these things are in private. She needs to make a case to the panel that they should be in public. The panel will hear that argument.
De Lille says that she is determined to clear her name.
The first issue will be we want a list of witnesses. We want to know all of those charges. Because in the Steenhuisen report that I've taken to the High Court for review, in that report, there are no names of people, there are no complaints against me, there are no surnames, there are no actual dates. So I was actually found guilty on issues which I've never been afforded an opportunity to state my case. But I am hell-bent, like they are hell-bent on getting rid of me. I'm hell-bent on clearing my name and restoring the reputational damage that they've done to me.
In some news this morning, taxi drivers are violently offloading stranded taxi commuters from private vehicles in the Kempton Park CBD. They claim that no one is allowed to ferry commuters on their routes. This after a planned taxi strike in the Ekurhuleni City Council in Germiston. Commuters who have lift clubs find it hard today to freely travel to their destinations. Taxi drivers stop vehicles full of occupants and offload them. One motorist told the taxi drivers these are people that he ferries on a daily basis to work. They had none of it and demanded them to get out of the vehicle. Well, the police, who have been deployed to oversee incidents like these, had to intervene. Well, taxi organisation Santaco has denied reports that roads will be blocked or closed off during their strike on Gauteng's East Rand this morning. Law enforcement personnel will be out in full force and commuters have been advised of road closures and delays. Members of the Ekurhuleni taxi industry are set to march from Kempton Park to Ekurhuleni Metro Council in Germiston. For more on the strike, we're joined on the line by Bafana Magagula, Santaco president. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Essentially, what is your motive for the strike?
Ekurhuleni, first let me explain Ekurhuleni region. This is not a national strike. This is a regional strike. Solely geographically, regions are divided into 5 in Gauteng. Ekurhuleni is one of the 5, and these are our members, are our affiliates, and they have indicated a number of dissatisfaction with regards to the BRT program. I will not mention all of them since they are going to be presented to the mayor today, for the mayor to view them, and only then after they've been publicized today we will be able to comment on them. Whilst I can safely say that it relates to the BRT program called Harambe in Ekurhuleni, which at this point it is sort of stalling. Stalling meaning it's going very slow, and industry is not taken care of in terms of being advised in terms of how this should work. Legally, the council should assist the industry in terms of appointing advisors with regards to such a program, because this is a new program in South Africa, and we do not understand it. So we are in support of the national strikers. These are our affiliates, and it also they'll be also presenting grievances related to taxi permits and the impoundment of vehicles which are being impounded, whilst the taxi permit issues are not resolved.
Now, Mr. Magagula, you mentioned that it is a regional issue. Which routes are likely to be affected?
The march will proceed from Kempton Park to Germiston head office, Ekurhuleni municipality head office, and R21 will be used. It has been applied for. That's the information we've got from our regional taxi council, because we made sure that they do it procedurally. R21 will be used, and only disturbances are expected during that time when these vehicles are moving or when our members are marching from Kempton Park to Germiston. They will be using combis in order to speed up the process. Otherwise, walking from Kempton Park to Germiston can take the whole day.
All right, thank you very much for giving us an update on the taxi strike. We will continue with that. For now, though, Corruption Watch has been in the forefront of fighting corruption in South Africa. Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis, now joins us this morning via Skype. Very good morning to you, Mr. Lewis. What is the Corruption Watch reaction on the suspension of SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane, of course, pending a disciplinary hearing?
Well, we're delighted. You know, we've been dealing with this Moyane Makwakwa thing since it first surfaced in 2016, and we are absolutely certain that both Makwakwa and Moyane have contravened some very important legislation that carries very severe criminal penalties. In the case of Moyane, the NPA have announced that they are not going to be prosecuting him, and so we've applied for we've asked them for a certificate establishing that, and we will mount a private criminal prosecution ourselves. Moyane belongs in prison. I don't think there's anyone in the country who has done more harm to democratic South Africa than Moyane has, and he must be punished for it. There's no doubt in my mind.
Of course, he's been suspended because he refused to resign. Why do you think Tom Moyane refused?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he still thinks somebody will ride to his rescue. You know, the Hawks, it seems, or the NPA are still prosecuting those who he drove out of the organization, out of SARS. Maybe he thinks the Hawks and the NPA will rescue him again. But I think his time is drawing to an end, and he will be fired. But more important than that, he needs to be prosecuted. And you know, as I've said, if the NPA don't do it, we will do our utmost to do it ourselves.
Now, in light of what's happened and the dark cloud that seems to be simmering over SARS, what corrective action needs to be taken going forward to restore confidence in the South African Revenue Service?
Well, you need to appoint an honest leader, for one thing, and the whole organisation needs cleaning out. Just amongst the most urgent tasks facing the president is cleaning out SARS, the NPA, and the Hawks.
Indeed. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. David Lewis from Corruption Watch, the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, on the suspension of Tom Moyane, SARS Commissioner, from President Cyril Ramaphosa. Going back to one of our top stories this morning, we are now joined in studio by Ekurhuleni MMC for Transport, Mr. Petrus Mabunda. Of course, this is on the backdrop of that taxi strike that is taking place on Johannesburg's East Rand. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
What essentially do you make of the taxi strike this morning?
It's regrettable that it's taking place. In light of the continuous discussions that we are having with the taxi industry. But South Africa is a democratic country. If there is a need from their side, or they feel that they are aggrieved to demonstrate, they can demonstrate. But we are continuously engaged in engagement with them, and we are going to have a discussion with them as we have previously had. Even yesterday, till late, we were locked in a discussion with the taxi industry just to see if we can't find a solution on the impending impasse.
And we understand this morning that privately owned vehicles have been stopped on the roads and passengers are being forced to get out of the private vehicles. What do you make of that?
Yes, we've heard that, and we've tried to communicate with the industry, because out of our discussion with them, we were told that it's not going to affect private vehicles. It's only the taxi industry that intended to engage in this protest as a demonstration of their dissatisfaction of the issues that they will have raised it with us.
At this point in time, are you still unaware of some of those grievances that they have apart from the delay in the BRT?
Yeah, there's key amongst their grievances is that we need to appoint a technical advisor for their part as soon as possible. And it's an issue that the city is grappling with, which is an administrative matter. You will understand that in the city, we don't simply go and appoint people. There's an issue of supply chain processes, and that is prescribed within the Municipal Finance Management Act. So in as much as we agree that there is a need for us to appoint the technical advisor, due processes must be followed so that our systems are as clean as possible.
Now, there seems to be a disconnect between Santaco and the Transport Department. Time and time again, whenever they have issues, they seem to be embarking on taxi strikes. Where do you think the lack of communication is coming in, where parties can't sit down together first before coming to this point where we see ourselves having strikes on the roads?
I agree. It's regrettable because we've got a negotiating team from the city and from the industry. So this team continuously sit, thresh out issues, discuss, and if there is a need for political intervention, we do intervene. But there's issues like these ones that made them to go to the street, which is regrettable, but it's administrative in nature. If there is an appointment that needs to take place, in as much as you understand that it needs to happen, it's impossible that you can do it within so pressed time, because there must be a tender, adjudication, award. There's quite a lot of supply chain process that needs to be followed, as the MFM will demand us that we do. But we understand from their part that there is no way in which we can sit around the table with them without that technical advisor, because it is to their advantage. And they remember the system is new in South Africa. They are also not expert on the system. They will therefore need legal advice, accounting advice. They will need expertise in order to be formally constituted at the negotiating table, and that's why we must appoint that technical advisor in terms of the National Land Transport Act that came with this issue of BRT. But unfortunately, in this case, due to processes, we could not have appointed that technical advisor in time, which agitated them.
Now, apart from handing over the grievances this morning, we understand that the taxi industry is also calling for the resignation of Ekurhuleni City Mayor Mzwandile Masina. What do you make of that?
I will not understand why it's leading to the resignation of the executive mayor, because, as I said to you, it's probably lack of communication, because the issue of supply chain and appointment has nothing to do with the executive. It's purely administrative. And the executive mayor, in his capacity as the mayor, does not sit in adjudication committees or appoint service providers. So you will not know in the city who needs to be appointed where. And I think, and with regards to whether he must resign or not, I think it's just ill-informed. But it's something that we're going to have a discussion with them after they've handed their memorandum of grievances, because probably if there's any other than what we know, we'll then have a session with them around the table to discuss what are these issues, and then we'll discuss it with them and find an amicable solution.
Lastly, just before we wrap it up, what do you think needs to be done to be able to resolve issues like this going forward? What mechanisms do you think need to be put in place going forward?
I think from our point of view is that because this BRT is a flagship, we will need to find a mechanism that will deal with issues of supply chain and expedite it as soon as possible, or as and when it's supposed to appear, so that it should not affect the process of discussion or the negotiations that we are engaged with the industry. And that team of experts from their part and from the city will need to pre-plan issues that needs to happen, so that we don't have a recurrence of what had happened today, which is regrettable, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was Ekurhuleni MMC for Transport, Mr. Patricia Mabunda. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Some other news, Nahawu SACP Young Communist League and Dinosa is marching to the office of Northwest Premier Supra Mahumapelo this morning. They are demanding that the Premier resign. They blame him for the crisis currently experienced in the Northwest Health Department. Well, this includes large-scale corruption with the awarding and paying of tenders. Let's cross to SABC's news reporter, Silwane Kakao, who is standing by for the latest on this. A very good morning to you, Silwane. What is the latest regarding the march to the office of the Northwest Premier this morning?
Well, a very good morning to you indeed. We are coming live to you from Muntiwa Stadium here in Mahikeng, where the march is expected to start. It hasn't yet started, but people are still arriving in their numbers. Yes, as you rightfully said, Nahawu, Dinosa and the Young Communist League of South Africa, members of those unions will be marching as they demand for the Premier of the Northwest, Premier Supra Mahumapelo, to resign. They are saying he seems to be in the center of corruption within various government departments in the province. You'd remember that recently the Department of Health is one of the departments in the province that was under fire recently after it awarded a contract of 30 million rand to Mediosa, and which is a Gupta-linked company. But there's various issues basically that have led to this march this morning. It's not only that. And joining us to give us more details right now is Tsietsi Letsebe. He is the Deputy Provincial Secretary of Young Communist League in the province, and he will tell us why they want the Premier of the Northwest, Supra Mahumapelo, to resign.
Well, thank you, May. The reason we want the Premier to be recalled from his position as the Premier is basically because for the previous years we've been expressing our dissatisfaction about his kind of leadership and his leadership style. At the center of our debate was the manner in which he's leading us as a province. The Premier has presided over a government that is encroached by corruption. And not only that, the Premier has also abused the office that he's been given by the people, he has been elected into by the people, by ensuring that he makes it normal for people to get used to the Guptas and the state capture in the province. And that is basically some of the reasons why some of the reasons that we are advancing as to say the Premier must resign.
I know the other issue is that you, as all the unions that I've named, Nahawu, SACP, the Young Communist League of South Africa, as well as Dinosa, are not confident that they will win the next elections, with Premier Supra Mahumapelo being the face of the ANC in the province. Is that exactly, what do you think about that? What is your take?
Well, in its January statement, the ANC National Executive delivered statement noted that the African National Congress-led government was fractured. It was fractured on the basis that policies were compromised as a result of corruption in government departments, which then made it difficult for the African National Congress-led government to deliver to the people. And that is a reality in our province. In the specific conditions of our province, it's worse. It's worse because the Premier, the incumbent Premier, has made sure that in each and every department, he micromanages departments by placing them under administration. And not only that, but also making sure that the appointment of HODs and other directors is his prerogative. He ensures that he abuses that power to appoint HODs and other directors to ensure that the looting of the state becomes a reality in the province. Now, we are of the view as the Young Communist League that should this proceed, should things continue as they are, then we are likely to lose elections in 2018.
Thank you very much. Other issues, of course, that I can tell you about is that Nahawu has been saying that the Department of Health has been misspending money while it's failing to even pay bonuses to its employees. We're going to chat quickly to Mutlalepule Ramafoko. She is Dinosa Acting Provincial Secretary, and she'll also tell us more about these issues. Firstly, also as Dinosa, why are you marching today?
We are marching against the Northwest provincial government, specifically the Department of Health, because of the irregularities that are happening there. The department decided the Premier decided to put the department under administration. But subsequent to that, he introduced the contractors that is milking more monies than when he can appoint employees on permanent basis. Like for an example, he contracted Marang that place professionals and non-professionals within the department. They are claiming exorbitantly high tariffs from the department and paying our employees peanuts. Like as we are saying this, there are employees who are not paid by Marang since from December. They introduced the Buthelezi ambulance that is milking the department plus minus 53 million each and every month. They have also introduced the Mediosa, which does the screening. They paid it upfront 30 million without following the proper supply chain processes. They pay it 30 million upfront. And currently that Mediosa is only doing the screening for the patients and refer them to the facilities. Okay. That poses the burden.
All right. Sorry for the interest of time. Okay. So why do you want the Premier to step down as Dinosa?
The Premier, in simpler terms, behaves like the MEC of all the departments. The MECs are no longer the political heads of the departments, but the Premier is the one who takes decision on their behalf. For an example, on the issue of Mediosa, the HOD, Dr. Lekalakala, signed that contract together with the Premier without the knowledge of Dr. Masike as the MEC for the Department of Health. So we believe that the Premier is not doing justice to the department. Instead, he is having the personal interest within all these departments. Like if I can take you back, you remember the removal of Comrade Madoda Sambat. Comrade Madoda was removed that he sold land for something like 70,000. Subsequent to that, they signed a 103 million contractor within his department.
No, thank you very much. Those are some of the issues coming from Nehawu, from Dinosa, from SACP. They want the Premier of the Northwest, Supra Mahumapelo, to resign. They say he is in the center of corruption allegations happening in various departments of the Northwest. This includes the Department of Health, the Department of Public Works, and Office of the Premier itself. That is all some of the issues that are coming up from people who are demanding that he steps down. They will hand over a memorandum later on when the march begins.
Thank you very much. SABC reporter Selwane Kakao giving us the issues there that the residents are grieving over in the Northwest Health Department. Well, moving on to another big story in the past couple of months. The accused in the recent double murder case of Mpumalanga children. One of the children had albinism. The story has once again put the spotlight on the plight of individuals living with albinism. Well, for the latest on the court matter, we are joined by a reporter who has been on top of the story, Sibongile Mkani Mpolweni. A very good morning to you, Sibongile. What has happened in court today?
Good morning. Yes, we are outside the court in Witbank where two cases will be appearing today. One, the one that you've mentioned of the two children that were kidnapped at their home at gunpoint, one with albinism where they were killed and their body parts taken, some body parts taken to Swaziland where a Sangoma and other suspects have been arrested. They'll be appearing today in this court applying for bail. And then there's a second case where a white lady was also killed and her body parts taken. There is another Sangoma appearing in that case that was arrested last week. So that case is also appearing in the same court, both cases. But I'm just going to move out of shot so that my colleague Mzolisi Kokwana just show you what is happening behind me. We know that the community's interest on this case has been huge from day one. The ANC has been organizing and mobilizing people to come to court each and every day. We saw DA and EFF last week. Today, the ANC is here again in numbers, as well as some members of the DA are arriving, as you can see there in those visuals. And we know that during the first appearance, the members of the community stoned police, demanding demanding that the suspects be handed over to them so that they can deal with them, saying that they don't deserve to go through the justice system and that they must die the way they have killed those people in the hands of the community. This was reiterated again this weekend by people with albinism, where there was a meeting between traditional leaders, traditional healers, as well as people with albinism, organized by the ANC in the Nkangala region, where people were being educated and talking to Sangomas saying that no, a proper and honest Sangoma or traditional healer does not use body parts, and that a Sangoma heals people and they don't kill people. So those who kill and tell people lies, saying that you need certain body parts of people with white skin color, albinism, or white people, it is not true, it is lies. And people with albinism are saying that it's time that the government put their words into action and start treating those killing them, hunting them down with the same manner in which they are treating them. So they are calling for the death sentence. We've seen people with albinism coming into court today. They are inside court. The two cases have not been heard yet, but the prosecutors and the investigators, we've seen them, they are in court, and the families of those people, they are here. Anytime now the proceedings will resume.
Thank you very much. That was reporter Sibongile Mkani Olwene giving us updates on those killings there. Now the court cases that have garnered huge support outside the court this morning. Let's have a look at the question of the day. We're asking what action should be taken against those implicated in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. You can send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. We do know that it was handed out yesterday, that judgment by a retired justice, Dikang Motseneke. Let's have a look at tweets at SABC Newsroom. These people must be jailed for a maximum of 25 years. Finish Ankla. Tebe says they must get arrested. And Khasa says they don't deserve to be associated with the community they belong in. Khosi Mampuro, of course, that is prison. Let's have a look at our poll question today. We're asking, do you support President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to suspend SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane? Of course, we do know that Tom Moyane refused to resign. Just over 600 votes coming in. 89% of you are saying yes. 11% of you are saying no. Let's have a look at some of the comments behind the numbers. Mr. King on Twitter says, why is this even a question? Well, it is very important. Master or Ikona says, Mr. Moyane has done everything in his power to protect all those that are said to be corrupt or shady not to pay taxes. It was about time for him to be released from his duties. And Valen is standing by with a bit of sporting highlights. Valen?
Thank you very much, Shante. But we actually start off with our sports question this morning, and it's on the back of comments made by Martina Navratilova following the BBC Panorama program, where she said she was shocked to find out that she earns 10 times less than John McEnroe for basically doing comparable work. So we asked, should female athletes earn the same as male athletes? Please send us your comments at SABC Newsroom. And then later on in sports, South Africa are trying to tune out the noise behind the scenes of a bad-tempered series against Australia and focus on the third test. Opening batsman Dean Algo says it's been a hectic last 2 weeks.
Run out in this situation, and it's AB de Villiers.
Orlando Pirates assistant coach Rulani Mokoena will no longer be travelling with Bafana for their Four Nations tournament in Zambia. Bafana coach Stuart Baxter blamed poor communication on staffers' side as the reason.
It was a shock because John McEnroe makes at least £150,000. I get about £15,000 for Wimbledon, and unless John McEnroe's doing a whole bunch of stuff outside of Wimbledon, he's getting at least 10 times as much money.
And Martina Navratilova speaks out against the massive gender pay gap in broadcasting.
Well, the 2018 Easter Long Weekend Road Safely campaign kicks off. Amnesty International blasts Nigeria's security forces for ignoring repeated warnings of a potential militant attack. The Transport Minister Blade Nzimande is today launching the 2018 Easter long weekend road safety campaign. It's aimed at reducing road traffic accidents. An integrated law enforcement operation targeting long-distance drivers will be put in place at Heidelberg Weybridge. The program is a joint partnership with the Department of Health, municipalities and the taxi associations, among others. SABC's Hasina Gori is at the launch and she sent us the report.
Safety campaign has been launched by the minister here ahead of the Easter long weekend. To talk to us more of this safety campaign, we're here with the Minister of Transport, Blade Nzimande. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us what is the purpose of this specific road campaign and what is hoped it's achieved by it?
Well, as you know, we have a 365 days road safety campaign. But during heightened periods of holidays or pilgrimages, we then heighten our activity. With this, we are heightening focus on road safety, particularly during the Easter period and the school holidays, because that's when there is a lot of travel. We also here in the N3, because the N3 is one of our busiest highways when it's during the Easter weekend. To actually interact with the motorists immediately here, emphasize the importance of doing very basic things that contribute to better road safety. No drinking and driving, fasten the seat belts, not only those who are sitting in front, those who are sitting at the back. Make sure that the children also have got their seats so that we avoid and minimize deaths and fatalities, which is one of the biggest challenges that we still face in our country.
Well, Amnesty International in Nigeria says the country's security forces ignored repeated warnings of a potential militant attack hours before more than 100 children were kidnapped in the northeastern town of Dapchi. In a report released yesterday, Amnesty's Nigeria director, Osai Ojigoho, says local authorities failed in their duty to protect civilians just as they did in Chibok 4 years ago. The report says that several local leaders alerted the Nigerian army to the presence of a convoy of militants in a village about 30 kilometers from Dapchi town. Later that evening, they attacked the school in at least 9 vehicles. 110 children between the ages of 11 and 19 were abducted. The incident in Dapchi occurred on the 19th of February and had the hallmarks of the 2014 abductions of the 276 students from the town of Chibok. A month later, and there's still no sign of the 110 schoolgirls. A military spokesman denied that they had been warned of militant insurgency presence in the region. Well, African leaders will on Wednesday launch the world's largest market of at least 1 billion people and a combined gross domestic product of $2.5 trillion during an African head of state summit in Rwanda. The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to ease the movement of goods and services across the continent. President Cyril Ramaphosa will lead the South African delegation to the extraordinary summit in the Rwandan capital, Kigali. Negotiations for the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area were launched in Johannesburg back in 2015. For more, let's go live to our SABC News correspondent, Sarah Kimani in Kigali. Very good morning to you, Sarah. What is expected in Kigali today?
Well, today business leaders will be meeting various African leaders, and the idea is for them to discuss the modalities of how the African Continental Free Trade Area will be implemented across the continent without affecting markets, and also ways that African governments can remove trade barriers so that the continent can start trading more with itself and within itself.
And I'm also joined in studio, Sarah, by analyst Liesel Lowe-Vaudren. She's an analyst from the Institute for Security Studies, focusing on the African Union and the African integration. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let's firstly discuss why Nigeria seems to suddenly have pulled out.
Yes, there seemed to have been pressure from trade unions and others in Nigeria, so it was a very last-minute decision of Nigeria to pull out. It's interesting, we saw this at the end of last year with negotiations for Morocco to join the Economic Community for West African States, a big economy on the continent that had just joined the AU, and there was the same opposition from inside Nigeria. Nigeria, of course, a big player in ECOWAS, because companies don't want to be flooded with goods from outside, but of course it's a give and take. So the question remains, if Nigeria stays out of the CFTA, will it not be ultimately the loser? One could perhaps, compare that to Brexit, where, you step out of a customs union or a free trade area, and ultimately, you might end up being the loser. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there, definitely. Sarah, what essentially now does this mean for a continental free trade agreement, in having a look and seeing that Nigeria has pulled up?
Well, the pulling out of Nigeria is just one of the many challenges that the continental free trade area faces, because we understand that bigger markets are quietly talking and saying that this may affect trade, and they feel that their markets will be flooded by the smaller countries. But a country like South Africa is saying this is good for both the big and smaller economies. But also the main challenge is that there are so many agreements that must be ratified on the national level before this can take effect. So it will still be time before it can fully take effect. But also it's important to say that countries are already talking about the trade barriers that have existed before. They're also talking about Africa not being such a manufacturing continent, and that they export a lot of raw commodities. So there is a feeling that then the continent will need to enhance its manufacturing sector if it is really going to gain or to benefit from this bigger market of 1 billion people.
Definitely. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Sarah Yamani, SABC's East African correspondent, giving us an update on that and also the challenges, of course, faced. Let's have a look at how these relations in Nigeria pulling out could actually pave the way for other economies like South Africa.
Yes, these are very complex negotiations, as Sarah just said. At the moment, the African Union is leading on this issue. That's why it's taking place in Kigali, the signing. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda is chairing the African Union this year. But of course, South Africa and the big economies like Nigeria, Egypt, Angola, and Algeria are the big heavyweights on the continent. And South Africa has been very involved in, for example, the tripartite trade agreement, which is between SADC in Southern Africa, COMESA, which is in East Africa, and the East African Community. So we've had long experience actually of these kinds of trade agreements that really are supposed to be the building blocks towards a continental free trade agreement. And there are 6 phases really of this agreement that would ultimately was planned initially to end at 2028 with a full customs union and a monetary union, but we are far behind these negotiations, and with Nigeria pulling out, you can see how complex it is, because some countries could just sign and ratify the free trade agreement and that's it. Others need to take it back to Parliament where it then needs to be discussed. So this is really, this signing tomorrow is a very important political event. It will give the impetus to it. It will give the backing to the negotiations, but it's not as if tomorrow, if you are, exporting from Zambia to Botswana or elsewhere, or the Nigerians exporting somewhere, importing, that immediately it will become much easier. One major stumbling block, of course, is the free movement of people. There was a protocol signed now in January at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa on the free movement of people. But that is a major stumbling block. Big companies can export and import easily, but if if people can't travel, and as you know, for Africans, that is a major thing. If you need to stand in queues for days to get a visa from Kenya to come to South Africa, you know, so there are many things, but at least now we feel the political impetus is there. It is being led at the moment by Rwanda, but I think South Africa will play a very important role behind the scenes, but also perhaps, you know, hosting some of these talks and providing consultants to look at really the nitty-gritty of the agreement.
Now, we spoke about some of the stumbling blocks as well as the challenges. What are the advantages of this?
Major advantages. I mean, it will be able to increase intra-African trade to, some of the experts say, up to 50%. Today, it's just around over 12-13%. Wow. So Africa is still looking towards exporting raw materials. There are very few countries that have been industrialized to such a point where we are actually exporting goods and services then. So it will be very advantageous because, of course, it makes just so much sense for you to export across the border rather than to Europe or elsewhere. Smaller economies, of course, are worried that they will be inundated with more products from South Africa. Already, South Africa is the biggest investor on the continent, together with countries like Morocco and so on that invest in West Africa. But if we can find a model where countries, let's say, for example, the textiles in Lesotho or in Zimbabwe, other countries that have small nascent industries can be helped to build that up so that they can also take advantage of this free trade. It can be a win-win situation, but it is very, very tricky.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining us in studio. Of course, analyst Lizo Lo-Valdron, analyst from the Institute of Security Studies, focusing on the African Union as well as African integration. Also speaking about Nigeria and them pulling out and what that could possibly mean for other economies such as South Africa going forward. Indeed, let's have a look now at some of your sporting highlights. Valen Kirtley is standing by.
When life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
Our Bill of Rights is the cornerstone of democracy. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity. SABC News celebrates Human Rights Month in the year of Madiba. #Know Your Rights.
Welcome back to Newsroom. Let's bring you that sports news. Now, the Proteas are looking forward to getting back to business, trying to win a series against Australia, which is poised at 1-1 with 2 matches to play. The third match begins on Thursday in Cape Town.
It would be nice to put it behind us now. I think there's been so much noise and people have actually forgotten that there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's such a great test series actually happening between two extremely strong and competitive teams. It's just a pity that all this backroom noise is actually hindering, which is quite an exciting test series. And so it would be nice to, whatever happens, we just put it behind us. And whether KG's playing in the third test or not, it's out of our hands. And hopefully we can just put this behind us and we can just carry on playing cricket.
Proteas fast bowler Kagiso Rabada will know by tomorrow if he'll be able to play in the third test match against Australia. Rabada has appealed the level 2 breach of the ICC Code of Conduct, which led to a 2-match ban. New Zealand's Michael Heron was appointed the Judicial Commissioner for the hearing, and it was held via video conference. The hearing is reported to have lasted over 5 hours, where Rabada was represented by advocate Talia Mpofu. Rabada was handed 3 demerit points and a 50% fine by ICC match referee Jeff Crow for an inappropriate and deliberate shoulder contact with Australian captain Steve Smith. The incident was on the opening day of the second test in Port Elizabeth. He is the 3rd player to be sanctioned during the heated test series following David Warner and Quinton de Kock's incident in Durban. Orlando Pirates assistant coach Rulani Mokoena will no longer be joining Bafana Bafana for their Four Nations tournament in Zambia. Bafana Bafana coach Stuart Baxter blamed poor communication on SAFA's side as the reason. The former Mamelodi Sundowns assistant coach will not be able to make the trip. Bafana will take on Zambia, Angola and Zimbabwe in a friendly tournament which is scheduled to start on Thursday.
I think I got confirmation myself of the camp about 10 days before we were due to leave, so the actual negotiations, if you want to say, for the camp were protracted, and then therefore everything had to go very quickly, and I just think that possibly we in a normal world would have given Pirates greater notice, and they felt a little bit it was sprung on them. And that's understandable because they're in a pressure situation at the moment.
Staying with football-related news, Bidvest Wits have won the PSL Coach and Player of the Month awards for February. Coach Gavin Hunt and Lehloonolo Majoro got the nod after they assisted their team to move away from the relegation zone in the ABSA Premiership. One of Majoro's goals scored in February was against his former team, Kaizer Chiefs, his first since leaving the side in 2014. Former Mamelodi Sundowns player Leonardo Castro, now of the Amakosi, was rewarded with Goal of the Month for January for his debut goal against Baroka FC in Limpopo. And former tennis champion Martina Navratilova said she was shocked to discover that Britain's public broadcaster, the BBC, paid John McEnroe at least 10 times more than her for their commentary of the Wimbledon tournament. Navratilova told the BBC programme Panorama she found out McEnroe made at least £150,000 compared to her £15,000 when the BBC, under government pressure, released a list last year of the earnings of its top presenters and journalists.
For me, it's a part-time job. It's 2 weeks of my life. But for the women that work there full-time, maybe the discrepancy is not that large, but it's still, and it adds up over a lifetime. It's up to an amazing amount of money. So it's extremely unfair. And, it makes me angry for the other women that I think go through this.
The BBC might say, well, John McEnroe does more hours or he's on air longer.
10 times as much? I don't think so.
Said as only Martina Navratilova can. That is what inspired our question this morning on Newsroom, whether male and female athletes deserve to be paid the same amount of money. A couple of tweets coming in. Malome Babeng says at SABC Newsroom, if they're doing the same thing, yes. Carlos Matu says, then men should be paid more money than women. Only one sport that women are almost even to men, and that's tennis. Other than that, men are much better athletes than women. So let's pay them accordingly. Michael Big M Sitole says, yes, even more, but the reality is male athletes excel better than their female counterparts in different sporting codes, which in return attracts more endorsement deals and money for the male athletes. Look at the fastest man and woman in the 100 meters heat, and then look at their finish time. Some interesting comments coming for our sports question this morning on Newsroom. Stay with us, the program is back at the top of the hour.
Meningitis is a potentially deadly disease that affects more than 1 million people worldwide each year.
Well, it's an infection of the lining of the brain and the spinal cord. And it's caused by a variety of bacteria.
And also, importantly, with fungal meningitis, there's no transmission from person to person.
In South Africa and elsewhere in the world, the ministries of health itself have recognized this as an important disease to prevent. And vaccines have been introduced into immunization, routine immunization programs.
It's really important to prevent, and the best way to prevent is to have people know their HIV status, start antiretroviral treatment as soon as possible.
For all your health news, join Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
Our Bill of Rights is the cornerstone of democracy. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity. SABC News celebrates Human Rights Month in the year of Madiba. Hashtag Know Your Rights.
The Treasury announces the appointment of Mark Keenan as acting SARS Commissioner. Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille's fight for her political career intensifies as her disciplinary hearing starts. Hundreds of commuters have been left stranded in Ekurhuleni due to a taxi strike.
There's been so much noise and people have actually forgotten that there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's such a great test series actually happening.
With the decision of Kagiso Rabada's two-match test ban appeal still to be finalised, the third player to be sanctioned now by the ICC in the current South Africa-Australia series, the Proteas say it's time to put everything aside and focus on the cricket. And
coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Newsroom. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Shante Yankees. Valen is standing by with all your sporting updates. Very good morning to you, Valen. Of course, let's put things behind us.
Yes, and let's focus on what is a very, very exciting test series. Thank you very much. Good morning to you. Good morning to everybody at home. Looking forward to bringing you your sports at 2:45 every hour right here on the program. Here's Shante, though, with your lead story.
Your lead story at the top of the hour, the Treasury has announced that Mark Keenan has been appointed as acting SARS Commissioner following the suspension of SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane pending a disciplinary hearing. The presidency said last night that President Cyril Ramaphosa believes it is in the public interest to restore the credibility of the Revenue Service without delay. The president is concerned about the manner in which Moyane handled the matter of his former second-in-command, Jonas Makwakwa, who resigned last week. The president is also concerned about the management of VAT refunds, which he said had brought SARS into serious disrepute and adversely affected tax morality among taxpayers. Moyane has been under the media spotlight recently for his role in handling millions of rands in VAT refunds to a Gupta-linked company via a third party. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's determined to keep his commitment to establish a commission of inquiry into governance matters at SARS. Ramaphosa's statement comes after confirming his decision to suspend SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. Meanwhile, Corruption Watch has welcomed Moyane's suspension from SARS.
Well, we're delighted. You know, we've been dealing with this Moyane Makwakwa thing since it first surfaced in 2016, and we are absolutely certain that both Makwakwa and Moyane have contravened some very important legislation that carries very severe criminal penalties. In the case of Moyane, the NPA have announced that they are not going to be prosecuting him, and so we've applied for we've asked them for a certificate establishing that, and we will mount a private criminal prosecution ourselves. Moyane belongs in prison. I don't think there's anyone in the country who has done more harm to democratic South Africa than Moyane has, and he must be punished for it. There's no doubt in my mind.
Of course, he's been suspended because he refused to resign. Why do you think Tom Moyane refused?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he still thinks somebody will ride to his rescue. the Hawks, it seems, or the NPA are still prosecuting those who he drove out of the organisation, out of SARS. Maybe he thinks the Hawks and the NPA will rescue him again. But I think his time is drawing to an end, and he will be fired. But more important than that, he needs to be prosecuted. And as I've said, if the NPA don't do it, we will do our utmost to do it ourselves.
Now, in light of what's happened and the dark cloud that seems to be simmering over SARS, what corrective action needs to be taken going forward to restore confidence in the South African Revenue Service?
Well, you need to appoint an honest leader, for one thing, and the whole organisation needs cleaning out. Just amongst the most urgent tasks facing the president is cleaning out SARS, the NPA, and the Hawks.
Meanwhile, investigative journalist Jacques Poe and the author of The President's Keepers has commended Ramaphosa for suspending Moyane. While speaking on Morning Live, Poe said the move will allow Ramaphosa to rebuild SARS's reputation.
Moyane was definitely on Ramaphosa's hit list, to say it like that. He was appointed by Jacob Zuma in October 2014 without having any tax experience. His highest office in government was that of prisons boss. Now he was a Zuma loyalist, and he stopped the tax investigation into Jacob Zuma. He stopped the tax investigation into the Guptas. He disbanded all 5 investigations units at SARS, leaving the tax service toothless. And he drove a host of dedicated and skilled civil servants from SARS. He failed to collect the taxes of some very notorious criminals. And in the last tax year, SARS reported a 50 billion rand shortfall. Yeah. So Moyane had to go, and he had to go quickly.
Yeah, wasn't easy though. He was refusing to go. I mean, he dug in his heels and absolutely felt like he was going nowhere. At one point, you almost felt like he was untouchable until last night. That was.
Well, he was certainly untouchable under Jacob Zuma. Since October 2014, he's virtually destroyed and hollowed out the revenue service, and he was definitely untouchable under Jacob Zuma. But evidence, there has been evidence against Moyane now for more than a year that he was complicit in covering up the antics of Jonas Makwakwa. He is the second in command. And I think by doing that, he opened himself to suspension. The Commissioner of SARS is arguably the most crucial civil servant in South Africa. I mean, this is the organization that has to fill the fiscus, that enable the state to pay out 17 million social grants. So Moyane had to go. He's number 2. Makwakwa is also gone, and Cyril Ramaphosa can now start rebuilding the tax revenue service.
Managing partner of Amabungane says Tom Moyane's suspension is a clear indication that President Cyril Ramaphosa is serious about dealing with state capture allegations. Samsol was speaking on Morning Live this morning.
Apparently, he threatened to interdict this move, but the commissioner is appointed by the president, and so I think President Ramaphosa was within his rights to suspend Tom Moyane. We'll have to see if he continues the fight or he goes quietly. But I think this is a significant move from the president.
Yeah. What disciplinary proceedings will Moyane actually be facing?
That I'm not 100% sure of. I mean, I assume the president has laid out the basis for his loss of confidence. And it depends whether Mr. Moyane is going to stay and fight. But I think the important thing is that his appointment was really seen as being based on a political mandate. He came to SARS. He swept out the top management, and as in the case of Mr. Makwakwa, he was seen as protecting people close to former President Zuma, and I think this move by President Ramaphosa to get rid of one of the top bureaucrats in a key institution like SARS is important in terms of moving the ship of state to a different direction.
You know, one of the I think many people and articles this morning coming out and describing this move from our president by getting rid of Tom Moyane as I think one of the biggest moves when it comes to trying to rid this country of state capture, because Tom Moyane being very much so involved in state capture, if reports and allegations are anything to go by, somebody who has captured an institution that's always had a very, very good reputation, and yet its reputation has been tainted over these last months at the behest of some incredible staff members, including even seeing at the time the finance minister being removed there. We're talking Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, who's back in a different capacity now. So, I mean, there was a lot happening during that time when Tom Moyane was there. I mean, just remind us of some of the instances.
Look, I think one of the features of the Zuma presidency was Zuma's capture and control of the security institutions, and that includes SARS. After the capture of the Hawks and the police and the intelligence services, SARS was one of the last institutions with the powers to, in a sense, go after the president and the president's friends. And we've seen in Jacques Pauw's book, The President's Keepers, that his belief is that one of the major reasons for Moyane being brought in and the top echelon of SARS exiting at that time was because SARS was starting to go after the president around his taxes. They were starting to investigate the Guptas. They were starting to investigate other allies of the president. So there's an enormously powerful position. And I think this is an indication of President Ramaphosa's determination to cut the head off the state capture project.
Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille has arrived in Parliament for the start of her disciplinary hearing. The DA has charged de Lille with misconduct relating to her role as the leader of the DA caucus in the city of Cape Town. The party has accused her of covering acts of corruption and maladministration in the council. De Lille says she'll insist that the process should be open to the public and the media. Yesterday, chairperson of the DA's federal executive, James Self, said the hearing was a party internal matter.
I'm always confident. I fought long and hard to have this day and to have it open. And so I look forward that, you know, my name is being smeared in public and my name needs to be cleared in public. And that for me is the important task of today.
And I think they've stood by what they said, that, you know, this is an internal party matter. So what are you going to say when they say no?
Well, we've just been informed earlier on that I've never asked for the media to be there, but I've only asked for the public to be there. So they are now considering whether the public should be there. I really don't know what is their right story now, but I'm going to go in there now. And if they refuse to have the hearing open this morning, then I'm going to ask them to postpone it until I can go to court and get ask the court to force them to open it.
Madam Mayor, do you see this ending up in court today?
Well, I hope not. You know, I would like this thing to proceed and get over and done with. But, I mean, my condition is that it must be open to the public and to the media. I do know that Media 24 has made an attempt since yesterday to go to court to have it open this morning. So we'll see what happened this morning.
Well, for more on the story, we are now joined by our reporter Nomawethu Solwandle, who is in Parliament covering the disciplinary hearings for us this morning. Very good morning to Nomawethu. Just very briefly, we heard the Mayor saying that if the DA doesn't allow the public inside, she is going to be going to court. What is the latest on that?
Well, a very good morning to you, Chantel. Like you rightfully said, as we heard on that clip, we spoke to Mayor Patricia de Lille before she went into the Marks building where the disciplinary hearing is supposed to take place, where she says, you know, I've been waiting for this day for a very long time. I think it's been about 6 months now where we've seen Mayor Patricia de Lille in what you can call a war of words with the DA. And she says this day for her has finally come. She's always said, you have all these allegations on me, let's then put it to a test and see what's going to happen. I'm not saying that I'm not guilty. I'm not saying that I'm innocent. You have these views on me, and I say let's put it to a test. And the most important thing that came out this morning when she spoke to us before going in was that, you know, I've called for this to be made public. I am the mayor of Cape Town, and I believe that people should know what's going on with the mayor of Cape Town. Like you rightfully said, previously the DA has said that this is an internal party matter and therefore it should be happening behind closed doors. I mean, she went in just before 9. We're expecting everything to have to start inside at around 9 o'clock. But of course, we have been barred from going in, so I can't really say what's happening in there now. But I mean, after she said that if they say no to having the process in public, she will then go to court. So as the media, we've been camping out here to say, you know, any minute now, let's give it about 5 minutes. You know, it started, it hasn't started. We're not sure yet, but we're expecting her to come out much earlier, maybe at around 9:15, if the DA had maybe said, okay, we're not making this public, and then she would then go before the Cape Town High Court, which she would then launch an urgent court application where she'll let the courts decide on whether this process should be made public or not. I mean, we've seen a lot happening, Shante, within the DA since this war of words started with Mayor Patricia de Lille. We've seen her removed from all water augmentation projects where the deputy mayor was then put in, but we've also seen her continuing with all her other mayoral duties, basically saying, you know, the DA will not be able to get rid of me so quickly. They will have to work very hard because I've been doing my work, and I believe that I'm innocent until I'm proven guilty, which is why she's been confident in saying make this process public, because all you want is to see me out of this party, and you will not get off the hook so easily. So we're waiting outside the Marks building here in Parliament, where we're waiting for her to emerge any minute now. We're not sure what's going on inside, but we'll keep you posted on what's happening here in Parliament, Shante.
Thank you very much, Nomawethu Solwandle. As we wait, we will be giving you updates live from Cape Town, where the DC against Patricia de Lille is taking place. The taxi drivers are violently offloading stranded taxi commuters from private vehicles in the Kempton Park CBD this morning. They claim that no one is allowed to ferry commuters on their routes. Well, this after a planned taxi strike in the Ekurhuleni City Council in Germiston on Johannesburg's East Rand. Well, commuters who have lift clubs find it hard today to freely travel to their destinations. Taxi drivers stop vehicles full of occupants and offload them. One motorist told taxi drivers that these are people that he ferries on a daily basis to work, and they had none of it and demanded them to get out of the vehicle. The police, who have been deployed to oversee incidents like these, had to intervene. Earlier this morning, I spoke to Santaco President Bafana Magagula, who confirmed that the march is over delays in the completion of the Harambee bus rapid transit system.
It relates to the BRT program called Harambee in Ekurhuleni, which at this point it is sort of stalling. Stalling meaning it's going very slow, and industry is not taken care of in terms of being advised, in terms of how this should work. Legally, the council should assist the industry in terms of appointing advisors with regards to such a program, because this is a new program in South Africa, and we do not understand it. So we are in support as the National Strikers. These are our affiliates, and it also there will be also presenting grievances related to taxi permits and the impoundment of vehicles which are being impounded whilst the taxi permit issues are not resolved.
Now, Mr. Magagula, you mentioned that it is a regional issue. Which routes are likely to be affected?
The march will proceed from Kempton Park to Germiston head office, Ekurhuleni municipality head office, and R21 will be used. It has been applied for. That's the information we've got from our regional taxi council, because we made sure that they do it procedurally. R21 will be used, and only disturbances are expected during that time when these vehicles are moving or when our members are marching from Kempton Park to Germiston. They will be using combis in order to speed up the process. Otherwise, walking from Kempton Park to Germiston can take the whole day.
Well, Mineral Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe is having a media briefing on the mining charter. The minister met with social partners over the weekend to map the way forward. He will also outline his immediate plans and priorities concerning the department and the mining industry. Let's go straight to the briefing.
It will not be rallies, it will not be public meetings, it will be meeting of stakeholders in those areas. And we'll also go to the major labor sending areas where there's a concentration of mine workers, because when we talk of improving and developing communities, it is not only where the mine is located, it would also mean where the labor is sourced from. The MPRDA is already in the NCOP. We're hoping that it will be finalized sooner than later and be promulgated. We're considering appropriate ways to ensuring urgent progress in that level. Other matters that we're looking at, we're actively involved in resolving the challenges at Tegeta, a group of mines, particularly the four operational ones, Korenfontein, Shiva, Brakfontein, Optimum. We've met with the business rescue practitioners, mine management. We've met with the workers at Optimum. The business rescue practitioners have agreed and indicated that these assets are still good assets, which can be viable mined by other operators. So that process is underway. We're keeping a close watch on it. As a regulator, we don't want to run it, because one of the things that we want to ensure doesn't happen is where, as the ministry or the department, we begin to appoint who should do what without following due processes. We must follow due process and select operators there. We've also appeared before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee to provide it with a progress report on this matter. We have also indicated our openness to cooperate with Parliament through its committee. This is important to ensure Parliament oversight of our work and our accountability to it. Our aim is to find solutions that will keep the operations open and protect jobs. One of the things that we must deal with is this thing of care and maintenance, where you keep a mine under care and maintenance when there's still viable deposits in that mine, precisely because maybe you are reacting to the cyclical behavior of commodity prices and other reasons. We think that mines must be kept open. And I always link that to what I call high grading, where operators focus on high grade areas and leave marginal areas. If you don't combine the two, what you normally do in the long term, you sterilize marginal areas in a mine. So those are the things that we're paying attention to. And therefore, if we can find solutions and ensure that jobs are protected, we'll be happy. We want to see a thriving industry that creates jobs and a certain investment. Ultimately, the mining industry, as a key component of our economy, must contribute to the economic growth while meeting the commitments in the social and labor plans that it commits itself to. So it is not either social labor plans or a thriving industry, it is both. It is a thriving industry, a competitive industry, a growing industry that will meet the social labor plans with ease. So if you want employment creation, we must ensure that the industry is alive, is healthy, it can generate those jobs and protect them. Furthermore, we're paying attention to matters of health and safety in the mining industry. Last year, the sector recorded an increase in fatalities for the first time since 2007. In 2017, 88 facilities were recorded compared to 73 in 2016. And since the beginning of this year, we've seen 15 fatalities already in the industry. This requires urgent intervention. However, the application of the use of Section 54, where you stop operations, should be an absolute last resort, and avoid it to be used to manipulate companies because certain decisions must be taken. It must be a section we use to deal with health and safety issues when it is appropriate. The report into the incident, the accident in Lille mine has been completed. We've just received it. We're going through it. We'll update you on it. On administrative issues, which is the last issue, one, we've come to a department and find that the majority of senior managers are acting to this, acting chief director, acting this. And we said we must address that issue, confirm people to position so that the staff morale can be uplifted. If you have acting people, there's no certainty in the department, people act with confidence, they get undermined and so forth because the authority is borrowed. I always tell people in Sesotho what it means, barutwerim kobobo. Then outwerim kobobo, nobody takes you serious. They think that outwerim kobobo and they ignore it. We'll deal with that. And I must confess that there's a lot of potential in the department that we've observed. And also the ability to overcome past and present challenges. A lot of department, a lot of talent. We must just go and dig that talent, polish it, deploy it appropriately. We'll therefore delve into the allegations of corruption and manipulation. Those allegations directed at any official of the department will be attended to. If anybody is found guilty, serious action will be taken. Related to this is the critical importance of licensing system and the process that is fair, transparent, and efficient. Let me conclude by saying, ladies and gentlemen, that this is work in progress. We've just started. We're getting our feet on the ground. I thank you for the time and hope that we'll continue engaging with issues. I'm sure, and you will take questions. This is my news report, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take your questions. I'll take 4 questions in this first round. David, Ellen, Paul, Sister Ndega. David, are you ready? Yeah.
Minister David Mackay, Mining MX. The initial report from that first weekend meeting on the mining charter was that almost indicated that the third mining charter is a document that in many respects is something worth sticking to. Just based on following what you said today, to what extent will you be prepared to depart from much of the detail in that? Would you, for instance, have a completely open mind on rubbing out entire sections of that? So what I'm looking for, in essence, is just an indication as to, how creative you will be in respect of using Mining Charter 3 as a base case.
Ellen? Oh. Well, Paul.
Hi, Paul Burko with Bloomberg News. Minister, if you could elaborate a bit on, I thought you said something to the effect of reviewing the department for wrongdoing. If you could just kind of go into how that's being executed, or did I misunderstand you?
Reviewing
the DMR?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. You mentioned reviewing the department, I believe, the DMR for any wrongdoing that went on. If you could elaborate on how that will be conducted, and also separately in the meetings over the weekend, could you address the absence of AMCU and how you plan to go forward with that at this point? Thank you.
Alan?
Hello, Alan, second business day. Minister, could I ask why the Mining Charter 3, if it was such a deeply discredited document, to the point that the Chamber of Mines took it to court and outlined deep reservations about it, why not just scrap it entirely and start something new, or use Charter 2 as the basis for these negotiations? And then secondly, if you could elaborate on the amendments to the MPRDA. You say you wanted these expedited. How would this overlap with talks around the charter? Because surely that's going to inform a lot of what the new charter is going to look like.
Sandega?
Yes, you have a David industry that's caught between the imperatives of transformation and competitiveness. On one hand, you have declining contributions to GDP, declining investment, declining output. On the other hand, you have rising labor costs and rising energy costs, electricity costs, and other input costs. So add to this the reaction of the markets when Mining Charter 3 was introduced, a 51 billion loss on the stock exchange to mining stocks. Why then is it not apparent that perhaps we have a systemic problem, a far deep-rooted problem, and that Mining Charter 3 should be off the table, and a fresh start between stakeholders is due? Secondly, is 3 months enough to deal with such a systemic problem in a sustainable manner? And finally, what about the involvement of communities and mining communities in particular? Thank you. Amanda.
Amanda.
Minister, will you respond from this?
Amanda, tena wetu kano. Watu Amanda kutwa awetu. I am one person who is very sensitive to something called obsession, rather than dealing with issues that are confronting you. Because obsessions limit your thinking. Actually, what is interesting is that what is articulated by many of you was articulated by the chamber in the meeting itself, meaning that to a great extent you represent their views. You have not raised the views that were raised by the NUM, by SAMDA, by UWASA, and Solidarity in the meeting. You are articulating views of the Chamber of Mines, which tells us the relationships. Now, Chapter 3 is on the table. It is gazetted. The Chamber took it to court and we agreed to engage them. The starting point for engagement is not to say there's nothing, it's to say you have problems with Charter 3. What are those problems? That's why you start. What are the problems? Because Charter 3 to a great extent overlaps with Charter 2. Then let's identify the problems on Charter 3, which is what we did after a candid and a tough engagement with the Chamber. They gave us their problem with Charter 3 in writing. That's why now the teams that are working on the details will have something to work on. And our commitment is that anything that is reasonably raised in those objections will be looked into, if need be, amend Chapter 3. That's our commitment. So it's not a question of being tied and married to Chapter 3 that we cannot move. We know now what the concerns are. We're looking at them. If something is genuine, we will change it. That is the issue. But we cannot start from a clean paper and say there's no charter. There's Charter 3. The Chamber took us to court on Charter 3, and that is the basis of our discussion. How do we resolve the problems and the bottlenecks? The first problem has been resolved of not talking. We're talking to them. We talked to them 2 days. We said, if you want us on Tuesday, we'll be there. If you want us on Friday, we'll be there. That is the commitment we're having. And then we've put together teams that will engage them. We gave them 3 weeks because there's an Easter weekend, that will be a dead weekend. But 3 weeks, we want them to come back, we'll assemble again, meet and see how far have we gone. And having seen the work that we did over the weekend, I'm convinced that 3 months is enough, actually long, it's too long from where I see there. The absence of AMCU was invited, it didn't arrive. Today they are marching. I'm going there 12. I'm going to receive their memorandum because we'll talk to them, but processes will not be held ransom by any player in the industry. If you don't come, we'll continue. It doesn't matter who that partner is, we'll continue. MPRDA is legislation. It was taken to court, to the Constitutional Court, by the way. And the Constitutional Court ruled that it was constitutional. It's a law. So we'll deal with the charter is a tool for transformation. It's not law. So we want to complete the MPRDA, work hard, complete the charter, remove policy and regulatory uncertainty. And if we do that, then we can get into business of mining. Now, an ailing industry. Ailing industry. I don't know, when you talk of an ailing industry, you have done a data analysis of the platinum sector. Is it ailing? Have you analyzed the coal sector? Is it ailing? Have you analyzed your manganese sector? Is it ailing? Have you analyzed your iron ore? Is it ailing? You can list them. You don't describe the industry as ailing because 130-year gold mining is declining. So mining in South Africa is not equal to gold mining. Gold mining is declining because it has been active for 130 years plus. So you can't just see the industry in the picture of the gold mining industry. And I think that description itself is wrong. And that's why then you ask another wrong question. Because your description of the industry is wrong, of declining industry and rising costs. Right is rising costs. You know, one time, by prior learning, I learned something called productivity and efficiency. And I was told that it is about your ability to produce more with the same amount, whether it is capital or labor or anything, or produce the same with less. Now, I don't know the rising cost of labor. How to call them? To call wage increase the rising cost, therefore, because the industry is in decline, workers must have their earnings eaten up by inflation, and that is right. I think that approach is dangerous to me. The reason that there is a
well, that's Mineral Resources Minister Gore Mantashe giving a briefing on some of the immediate plans and priorities regarding the government as well as the mining industries, touching on issues of governance as well as staff morale, corruption as well as licensing, among other issues. Let's cross over now to Parliament. Of course, there is a SABC committee taking place in Parliament. We do understand that the Group Chief Executive Officer is speaking. Let's cross live.
Meant mainly for education, voter education and all of that, but the actual production itself is going to be a challenge for us because we have to be everywhere and be seen to be everywhere at the time of the production. So the issue of the sports rights, we are making an appeal to our minister to actually get all the parties involved to see where we can get a relaxation of some sort in terms of the mandate that we have. Because as I said, that the 1 billion that we require for this fiscal must come from somewhere. And at the moment, our resources are quite under pressure. And then on the issue of DTT, we recognize that we are probably the most at risk as the SABC in terms of DTT, because if we don't see a speedy move on DTT, it is our viewers that are going to be affected, which means we will have less eyeballs, which will then have a ripple effect in terms of the advertising. So to that extent, we had a meeting, a workshop in March, with USASA, with Centec, with all the parties to try and understand that what can we do on our side to actually speed things up, because we believe that we have the most to lose as the SABC. So we do believe that we need to be playing a much more central role in this. We've said as much to the minister to say that we will collate all the outcomes of the workshop that we had to see how we can then be brought into the centerfold. Then there's an issue of the TV license that are the additional slides that we have included. And the reason why we felt that it was important to explain is that context is important, because the question was asked, how much is owed to the SABC? And a response was given, but we probably did not package it as we should have so that it does not create the headline that it created. But just for the record, in terms of how much we've collected, we've tried to give a picture of the past few years on what is actually collectible. You will see that we've always just hovered just over $1 billion, but a lot happened between 2016 and 2017 when certain decisions were made, and you can see how we reduced our collections there. A lot of those decisions have been reversed, and we're starting to claw back, and we're starting to work back to the 2015, 2016 levels. And we just thought that it was important to explain how TV licenses is made up. To say we've got new licenses as and when people come for the first time, and also the existing licenses that get renewed every September. I think most of you would be September. And we have 9 million active accounts on those. And then we have the overdue accounts, which are really serviced by the legal firms and the debt collectors. So in our database, we have a split of business, domestic, and also the government accounts. Now, some of these things have been outstanding for more than 10 years now. The TV license, similarly to tax, it doesn't really go away. So it just keeps accumulating in terms of the numbers that are sitting in the database. So the SABC has tried a lot of strategies in terms of the collection of license fees, but it is also important to say that the license fee is a grudge payment. I think you can see, even with the performance in the previous slide, that every time there's something negative about the SABC, you can have a direct correlation to the numbers, because immediately that's the only time people are able to exercise that I'm not going to pay the TV license. So we do have debt collectors that are working on the old debts, but I think it's important to also mention that in terms of the law, the penalty for areas is 10% every month with a maximum of 100%. So you'll see that those numbers are very similar, because if you do not pay the 265, in a year's time, your area is another 265, and that is how those numbers are accumulated. And that is just the split between business, dealers, and domestic. And also we did the split of what is between 1 and 3 years in terms of the 25 billion. I think I've already covered the fact that in terms of Section 27, that the way that the areas are calculated is that it incurs a penalty of 10% every month with a maximum of 100%.
Sorry, just to say that we don't have the slides that you are going through.
Okay, apologies. These are the ones that we've added.
Apologies, members. That's what I indicated, that what you will see on the screen is the latest presentation, because what was submitted, we had not unpacked the licensing, the TV license part.
Okay. Proceed.
Apologies for that, Chairperson, but yeah, it is on the screen. And what we also just wanted to say, how the 4.5 billion that was written off, what the basis was, is that from time to time we do data cleansing to actually validate what is in the 4.5 billion that was written off was after the 2016-17 data cleansing, and it was really based on foreign passport numbers, invalid ID numbers, the deceased persons, and also people that have emigrated, and the ones that there wasn't enough information to pursue. And from time to time, we do this data cleansing so that we can try and follow the right persons. I think we get a lot of complaints about people that are saying, why are you phoning me? And so it's a continuous effort for us to clean up the database here, TV license, and it's an ongoing process. So that's really how the 25 billion was arrived at. It's a combination of old licenses, but that are still in our databases owing. And I just thought that we will share with you some of the activities that are happening at the SABC. In the period under review, we conducted a culture and climate survey, because as part of our recovery plan, we recognized that there was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain that people went through at the SABC, and we thought it was important that we take a dipstick measure. So in response to the survey that was conducted in October, November, we had about 667 responses, I think, which then made it about 18% response. So in terms of research, we were told that that's sufficient to start to actually use as a base, because what we wanted to do was that at the beginning of the fiscal, we start fixing the right things from what the staff is telling us. We have already presented this to EXCO, and this is going to be used as part of our renewal process of the new SABC. It is going to be disseminated, the information is going to be disseminated back to staff at a divisional level, and there are certain interventions that we are going to be looking at. And then in terms of the wellness, the last time we were asked here, we were asked if we had done anything specific for certain staff members that had gone through different things. And I'm happy to announce that over and above our normal employee assisted program, there are certain interventions that we are going to be focusing on, particularly on the issue of counseling itself, and there's also the issue of substance abuse and also lifestyle-related matters in terms of work-life balance. We do have a specific therapist that is now going to be dedicated to assist the news team in particular. They will be starting to do that focus work now in April. And there's also a focus on commercial enterprises and also audience services. So those are the three areas that we are starting with. And Chair, in terms of the staff petition, I thought that I'll just mention that we are in the process of engaging the staff petition, because I think it's one of the things that was in the papers last week. We did receive a staff petition from the new staff, making certain allegations about the things that they're not happy with. We are in the process of engaging those. We couldn't engage between today and yesterday because we were coming here, but we are going to be engaging them on Thursday to get to the bottom of what their issues are. We are concerned that some of the issues that they're raising seem to be a repeat of the past, so we want to nip it in the bud and deal with those as soon as we possibly can. And then I will move to the last section, which is really the performance against the predetermined objectives. At this point, we had targeted to be at a break-even, but we're showing a positive amount of 102 million. But as I said, this must be read in the context of just an accounting explanation, because we don't have the cash. So this is a positive performance against the budget. We still don't have the cash, and therefore it should be read in that context. And then in terms of the creditors' payment, I've already mentioned to say that our target is 60, but we simply are not able to get to that, and therefore we have a negative performance of 128, and that's really due to the 557 million creditors that we owe. And also similarly to the debtors' days, is that because we have an early settlement discount that we're giving to certain clients, we are able to look at a minimal number, but it's because of the settlement arrangement that we have. And in terms of the ICASA local quarters, we are spot on. We actually did better than what is in our license, and we are very happy to announce that. And also in terms of the radio side, we've also achieved all our targets in terms of the news and also education and children, all the various genres. The issue of provincial programs, the performance of 18 programs vis-a-vis the 2 targeted programs is really part of it coming from the previous period, because it's only translating now. If you recall that last year we had under-delivered on the local programs, and these are some of the things that are now coming through. So the overperformance is really a delayed performance from the previous year. And then in terms of the marginalized language, we have a huge problem in this area, because one issue is the funding, but secondly, we don't have enough space to accommodate everybody, and not everybody is happy with the principle of equity, because people want to be treated equally because the languages are equal. So we do have engagements at the moment. We're trying to process requests from the Indebele group, who've also come to the SABC and given us some demands, and we're processing that via the minister. But what is important is that if these provincial and the language issues are to be addressed, it takes more than the SABC, and I think that it is important to address it in that way, to say that even if the SABC were to commission a lot of shows from the provinces, if there is no infrastructure, then it's a zero-sum game. So we need to get all the players involved so that we can actually succeed as an entity. In terms of the website, we have not done well on this, because one of the suppliers that we had brought on board is currently being investigated by the SIU, so we've put a hold on that. It was one of the irregular contracts that we've had to stop. So it has stunted the growth in terms of what we had targeted initially. And then We are also happy to say that in terms of how the board is now structured, we now have got a digital technology subcommittee, which is going to bring the focus on, from a strategic level, on actually what our role should be in the digital space and what SABC can do in that space. In terms of the staffing issues, again, we now have got. We've initiated an operating model exercise, and the operating model exercise is really to define what the SABC should be, what the SABC should be operating like. And I think it's important that I say at this forum that it is not an operating structure exercise, it's an operating model exercise that seeks to reposition the SABC, and naturally after that we will then look at the right skills fit and the right sizing of the organization, but it is just about putting the right model in place. Then there's an issue around the performance contracts for the period under review. All the executives and the top 3 did sign performance contracts, and with the corporate plan being tabled last week, we are now starting to contract for the next fiscal in terms of performance agreement. We are still struggling to roll it out to the lower levels, but in terms of the executives and the senior management, it is in place. On the issue of the training, we didn't do well because we didn't have a lot of money to put to training, so we only did absolutely critical training. So we didn't do well on this on this section here. And then in terms of the performance against the audits, the CFO has already spoken, but we've also had a renewed effort on internal audit, particularly to make sure that those things move, because we've seen that a lot of it was stuck in the 2 years frame. So we've done a lot of work in pushing those, and we're seeing a little bit of progress. We still can't praise ourselves on the AG ones because it's still work in progress, but on the internal audit ones, we've seen some improvement. And lastly, I think the one thing that we just wanted to talk about was the internal controls, to say that we are not a very risk-mature organization, and that's the one thing that we're trying to fix. So at the moment, there's a lot of effort into putting our risk management framework in place and entrenching it throughout the business and making sure that it becomes a pillar of our governance structure. I think at this point, we will take questions. Thank you. Do you want us to deal with the car issue afterwards, or do you want us to deal with it now? As a question, because you already asked us. Okay. Okay, Chair. With respect to the vehicle in question, it was one of the issues that were raised already at the ad hoc committee inquiry, to say that the SABC board had made a decision to buy a vehicle for Professor Makube, who was blind, and there was a need, or rather an identified need at the time, for him to have a dedicated driver. So the rationale was that instead of us using the services of different people to go and fetch him and different drivers, the motivation was that let him then be bought a vehicle and let him have a driver. The question was asked by Honorable Van Dam about the extras that were in the vehicle. I can't justify that or comment on that, Chair, but it is true that it was a Q5 and it did have extras. So what has happened is that the interim board... Chair, I need protection. The interim board had already made a lot of inquiries, and at this point, we have approved the disposal of that vehicle as an asset, and we're in the process of selling it.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. Before I hand over to members, Chairperson of the board.
Thank you, Chairperson. I thought we should maybe address all the other issues because the car is just one of them, but there's quite a number of other issues that we just want to deal with up front, if we can be allowed to do that. And also, I'll be supported by my other colleagues on this. I just want to first start with the issue of the staff petition. There are issues there that the management executive team is dealing with, but there are those issues that are for the board to deal with. We do also want to get to a normal situation whenever there are challenges in an organization, that people can follow internal structures to get issues resolved, as opposed maybe petitioning and putting things in the media that are house kind of things that can be addressed. So on the petition, there's three things. The first thing is around the vetting of journalists. That's what we want to explain from a board perspective. The SABC editor-in-chief issue, we want to clarify that also. Then from a petition, those are the things that we want to clarify from the board. Then also we'll touch on the legal fees. There was another headline on the 22 million legal fees that relate to the former COO. And then, of course, there are issues around the changes that we are effecting within the SABC. The truth is, we've been tasked to turn around the SABC, and part of the turnaround will be uncomfortable because we'll be doing things differently. And as you change things, other people may not necessarily feel comfortable. But let me start with the first issue of the vetting of vetting. What we've decided to do as a board is to seek a legal opinion to help us understand the background need of the vetting, so that we can also understand who needs to be vetted. We are clear on the fact that we are a national key point, but also we need to be clear who needs to be vetted, because if you look at the status of the SABC, does it mean that everybody who works there, from a person who makes tea to a person who cleans? So we are waiting for that legal opinion to guide us properly on what we need to do around the issue of vetting. So that's one of the issues that is raised in the petition. The second issue is around the editor-in-chief. When you read our editorial policy, it touches on the upward referral that the group CEO is the editor-in-chief for referral purposes. So on a day-to-day, operational matters are handled at the COO level. And that's what we want to clarify, because people may have misinterpreted the status of the editor-in-chief. Yes, the group CEO is the editor-in-chief, but the day-to-day operations are dealt with at an operational level. So the reporting line remains within the COO. So that's the issue that we wanted to clarify. On the issue of legal fees, the 22 million rand, I'm just going to request Michael Markovic just to explain where we are with it and what position we're taking as a board.
Thank you, Chairperson. Obviously, this predated this current board quite significantly. And I think a lot of the decisions that were made in terms of the legal fees were done in terms of approval by that board, and approval to cover certain of the fees relating to Mr. Motsoneng's litigation through either the insurance or an approval that was given by the board. What this current board has done to make sure that those kinds of things can never happen again just through management applying for coverage is that any claim for legal insurance has to be approved by this board, and it cannot just be willy-nilly granted if it's alleged that that particular person may have committed an offence or not complied with the Act. I think the controls with not the interim board, the one prior to the interim board, were not necessarily the same as what we would like. And we've now put in place measures to ensure that that kind of claiming for what might be seen as extremely litigious behavior cannot happen again.
Thank you, Michael. On the issue of changes that maybe you may have seen over the weekend, a lot of it is misinformation, but I'm going to request the COO just to give high level, because at the end of the day, some of these things are operational matters and we would want to leave them at that level, as opposed to coming and making a bit of a noise about things that are day-to-day operations. But Maruleng, if you can take us through.
Let me start by thanking the board and other members of the SABC board for my appointment as CEO. This is my first time appearing before this committee. I am both excited and indeed take note of the immense challenges that we face in trying to address some of the things that have been presented by us today. Let me begin by answering the question referring to the changes that have been noted here. I think it's important before I answer that we understand that these changes must be seen within the broader context of the changes that we're bringing about at the SABC, and this relates really to our mandate, which is essentially to ensure that we increase our audiences and indeed meet the commitment that we have made to maximize the quality of the content that we have on the SABC. I think if we are to contextualize some of these allegations, we also need to understand that these changes are also done as an attempt to grow the audience share in the SABC and really to retain or return our status to being a going concern. Let me start off by some of the changes that have been referred to in the media relating to radio and the repositioning that is happening there. And it's important to note that at this time of the year, just before we begin the new financial year, the various platforms that we run do from time to time engage in a process of re-looking at their schedules and the talent that is there. So it is not unusual in any event that we would have embarked on a process or a process to try and reorient some of the programming that is on our platforms. In this regard, one of the platforms that has been mentioned in particular is SAFM. So, Chair, if you allow me, I'd like to deal with that in particular and contextualize a little bit in relation to its performance in the past and really move away from the speculation on personalities that has characterized some of the falsehoods that the Chair referred to. SAFM as a platform in particular hit a particularly low point in about January 2017, where in terms of the RAMS measurement, which is the measurement that is used to look at audiences, had for a national platform 143,000 listeners. This for a national platform that has 127 transmitters is particularly low, particularly if you consider the cost of this transmission, which is calculated at just under 35 million rand. So you can see that the operating cost for this transmission for SAFM is particularly onerous to the SABC. It's particularly concerning when you consider the fact that certain of the talent pool that we were looking at also contributed to what we consider as these low audience figures. As I said, I don't want in this platform to talk about specific individuals in this regard. As a result of this, we engaged in a strategic review of the SAFM in the hope of turning around both its audiences and its talent in order to repurpose it. And the decision was made that we would change its format from being a simple news-driven radio platform to become what we describe as a talk radio platform with compelling news. And this would be still in line with our mandate, that is our compliance requirements in terms of ICASA, which we can talk to quite extensively in this regard. If I talk about the compliance mandate, the proposed offering will have a two hours of current affairs during the week, and there will be pockets of current affairs material delivered during this talk format periods. And in this regard, as we looked around for compelling audiences, we then decided as the operations component of the SABC to approach Mr. Stephen Grotes, who is currently serving notice with Talk Radio 702, to join SAFM as we engage in the new financial year in this revamped format and also to drive audiences. You would note that it is particularly important in radio to have a particularly compelling breakfast offering, which would ultimately lead to heightened adoption of audiences throughout the day. I would like to speak, if the chair would allow me, to some of the innuendo that we might have seen relating to the SAFM, and I'd read here in order not to misconstrue these statements. I think even though we do not want to emphasize race in our recruitment, it's imperative to indicate that there is only one person, one white person that is at this stage who have recruited, and that is Mr. Stephen Grootes. This therefore negates the notion that there is somehow an influx of white talent into SAFM, as has been alleged in certain media. The SABC is a public broadcaster which embraces the diverse South African society. It is therefore wrong to insinuate that the SABC is, in this regard, only for black people. We have also noted the allegations that the SABC is creating what some termed as a likeness to one of our competitors. It's important to note that a lot of the talent that is coming to the SABC of various races is coming to the SABC of their own accord, given the perceived turnaround that is going on. I think in this regard, I don't want to over-elaborate on the other changes, but simply to say that these changes do not affect radio, but also affect television. We've seen the change of the scheduling and lineup also in the evening slot on our channel 404 SABC News to bring in Mr. Bongani Bingwa. In the period under review, we've also seen Mr. JJ Tabane also being brought in to host a current affairs program. So therefore, Chair, you would realize that the changes that we talk about now really must be seen as part of the process to turn around the SABC and not led by any of the innuendo that may have preceded this presentation to Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. We're done.
DM?
No, Chair, that is the presentation from our entity, and I think I know you have proposed that there'll be a follow-up activities from your side on certain things with regard to entities. The proposal that I will also want to make, seated here, is that I know there's a process of digital migration, and in that digital migration process, the SABC also has its own responsibility, especially on content digitization. So it will be very important that as we interact with the committee, this item becomes part of the agenda so that the committee is taken on board on how we are progressing in making sure that this migration process takes place. Of course, there are overlapping roles from ICASA as a regulator, from the SABC for content, but also the Department of Telecoms and Postal Offices. So we are going to propose that we have an interministerial committee that prioritize this thing because other areas are overlapping. And a firm proposal I want to make to you, Chair, is that as a portfolio committee, maybe find a way of engaging with the DTPS portfolio committee and see whether, as you play oversight as committees, are we moving up to speed and meeting the deadlines that have been put? For now, as we were briefed, we are looking at June 2019 as the new target date. So I would want you not to make this thing part of the program of the committee, so that we are able to deal with some of these things. Of course, Chair, we have had an engagement with the SABC, and one of the reasons why we went to them as one of the priority entities was that let's hear the things that are pertinent and let's see how we can be able to move swiftly. So it will be important for them to always, as they engage with the shareholder, share with the shareholder on some of the things, even if they are internal and operational, so that all of us are on board and that we are able to confidently speak together on some of these things. Of course, we are still new, and we'll agree on how we operate going forward. The last issue is what the group CEO has also emphasized, the issue of stabilizing the board. It's a matter that you are responsible for. And from our side, staffing of executive and lower levels, so that at least the institution can be able to run accordingly, so that if there's all those assistances that we want to tap from, we're able to confidently say to whether treasurer or whoever, we have an entity that has capacity to deliver on its mandate. I think those were the comments, Chair, I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, dear. Members, Honorable Van Dam, Van Dijk, Machoba, Sedi, and Kalakun.
Thanks, Chair. I've got quite a few questions, but let me start with something positive. I think it's great to see the SABC headhunting talent from across media houses. I think you had big audience declines due to reasons in the past, so I think that is a great thing. I do not think you should be intimidated by reactionary comments saying that, basically insinuating that the SABC shouldn't hire white people. The SABC is there to represent the whole of South Africa, South Africans across racial, cultural groups. So you must make sure that when you headhunt across the board. I think the SABC has a very important role in nation building in South Africa. So I congratulate you for attracting talent and continue to do so. Grow the SABC's audience numbers and draw back advertising, which I see has gone down. Now about the SABC's finances. Now I know that we cannot blame the current board for what you've inherited. That's what you've inherited. But what we can hold you accountable for is what happens going forward. My question at every meeting is, what is the plan? What is the new funding model? What are you looking at that's new, that's innovative, that is different to fund the SABC? We know that last year you'd asked for 3 billion from National Treasury. What's up with that? What's the feedback that you've had from National Treasury? Has there been constant communication with National Treasury? What is National Treasury saying? Are you getting the 3 billion, or are they saying, which I hope is what they're saying, make a plan, find innovative ways to be self-sustainable. On the issue of the collection of license fees, 25 billion is a massive amount. It's not loose change, it's not Malia Matais, it's a big amount. So we know that before the contract was with Lorna Vision. The Lorna Vision contract was cancelled. That contract didn't deliver on what it was supposed to be delivering. That contract was cancelled at the beginning of last year, last year, July, yes. So since then, what mechanism is in place to collect license fees? How are you collecting license fees? And also, again, to speak about license fees, what are you considering, perhaps, to move away from the license fee model? Because quite clearly, South Africans are not interested in paying license fees. So what is your new funding model? This is what I ask every single meeting. We appointed this board and said, be creative, put together a team, find people from across the spectrum, find experts, find contributions from outside the industry, put a team together and find innovative ways to self-sustain, to stand on your own 2 feet like other broadcasters can. My other question is Bamao, that petition. So I'm going to be quite specific about some of those allegations that are mentioned in that petition, and I'd request that I be given direct answers to those questions. I know you're dealing with it, but there's some serious allegations which I think require answers in this meeting. Number one, there's an allegation that Sophie Mokoena gave an instruction to staff not to ask Mr. Ace Magashule questions about the recall of Jacob Zuma. Is that correct? Did you investigate that, whether or not that instruction was given to journalists? Number two, there was allegations of political interference in the newsroom. A complaint was submitted to the board. What was that complaint? What was the content of that complaint relating to political interference? What have you done about allegations of political interference again in the newsroom? That seems like we're sliding back. So what is being done about that? And then the shocking to me, this is flabbergasting, that Teresa Geldenhuys has been promoted. Teresa Geldenhuys, who was here in Parliament in the ad hoc committee of the SABC inquiry, who was found to have lied to Parliament, she's been promoted. How so? I don't understand that. Is it true that she's been promoted? How can she have been promoted? And then this is also a question. I'm glad to see that there's some sort of action being taken to deal with staff that were terrorized in the past regime, if I can call it that, in the past regime of terror. So I'm glad to see some actions being taken about that, but I don't believe it's enough. I know that one of the members of the SABC 8 was chased down the streets by a person who has a contract with the SABC. What are you doing to make sure that staff don't continue to be terrorized? I'm sure you're also aware about this matter, so please let me know what you're doing about that. And then editorial policy. There's been a delay at that again. So why has there been a delay on the completion of the editorial policy? Where is that? And then the matter of Hlaudli Motsoneng's legal fees. Now, I understand that it's subject to an investigation by the SIU. But in terms of your MOI, the 2013 MOI, you are legally bound to recover those fees. The MOI says that the SABC can cover the legal costs of a director or staff member if it relates to a bona fide legal action. Now we know that all of Hlaudli's legal actions were not bona fide. They were all malafide. So in terms of your MOI, you are bound by it to make sure that you recover that 22 million. And I believe that you absolutely must take the steps to recover that, that 22 million. And then you've given updates on the appointment of the CFO and the CEO. Updates on the appointment of the head of news. Yeah, that's it for now, Chair. Thank you. Just a few questions.
No, very, very, very important questions. My understanding was that Geldenhuys was retiring at some stage. And therefore he was kept just to transfer skills or experience to a particular person. Now, if it's true, then please tell us. The other thing, Chairperson of the board, collection of TV license fees. There is an agency that you employed services of. And the amount that you give us, if it can be broken down, the amount reflected here, is it what, after paying the service provider, it's what you get? Just those details, because they are very important. They will tell us if are we getting somewhere in terms of collection of TV license fees. Honourable Van Dijk.
Chair, my questions. It's indicated that the consultation fees for the second quarter is 31 million over budget by, or 31 million, and it is over budget by 14 million. That's 79%. I want you to please explain what was the nature of the consultant services required, the duration of the contracts, and if it was extended. Then it was also mentioned that the YouTube channel generates 140,000 views a day. I want to know how much money does the SABC generate from this, if any. And then I want to know, you indicated that the SABC websites are not attracting audiences because they're outdated, and there was a decline of 18%. I want to know the person that is operating the YouTube channel. I'm not very clued up, but I just want to know if this person or the entity body that runs the YouTube channel, is that the same company or is it a different company, or why don't you link the YouTube channel then with the website with the channel? I'm not sure if it can be done, but that should raise the audiences for the website. Also, like the chair said, I would also like to know the 312 million that is generated revenue for TV licenses. Is that how much is the SABC spending on collecting this revenue? I also want to mention, I got a complaint from someone that lives abroad for 5 years now, and they want to. What is the process for a person that lives abroad, that wants to, that already indicated that he's not living here, who still has legal battles with the SABC and cannot get rid of the SABC collecting TV licenses, because it's really embarrassing for our country actually if they don't have guidelines, or what do people do? Because I don't think it's user-friendly, the legal services in tackling that type of problem. So I would like to, I've got the reference number and everything, I would like to get a clarity on that. I want you to explain to me, it causes local content quotas, because I think a lot of people might be interested in precisely what does it mean. It is said that there's an underspend, or the underspend is the reason for the delay in contracting new properties, and besides the productions postponed. That leads to repeats, and I want to know how does this impact on the local content quotas. And then my second last question, I want to know how much was saved as a result of cancelling the New Age Breakfast show, or the New Age Breakfast. And then I also want to know at this stage, what type of training is considered or has already been done with regards to the DTT digital migration. I'm curious to know, because the first deadline that was supposed to be June 2015, and the Deputy Minister just said it's going to be 2019 now. Now, I just want to know, it's now how many years later, has any training been done thus far? Because it's a huge concern when it actually then happens, with all the availability of spectrum and the content that will be needed. So with regard to that, has any training been done? And what type of training do you consider from your side. Is there any plans in place for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the introduction from the Deputy Minister. And thank you for the powerful presentation from you, Nomsa Piliso. Chair, I welcome the report. The report is very clear. The only thing I will just touch on is the issue of the salaries that was demanded by the staff last year in 2017. They were demanding the 10%, but you agreed with 4.8% with the assistance of the CCMA. I'm correct? Yes. I'm just trying to check whether you agreed in that amount, because we don't want the same situation. We are facing the election by next year to have these interruptions, because really the strike was directed to the 54 National Conference of the ANC. But fortunately, you rescued the ruling party. Secondly, that successful broadcasting for that 54th national conference was the interest, even for the opposition parties. Well done for that, because the ruling party is always in a limelight to achieve better, even to those to those industries. But I don't have much more than to know about that agreement of that 4.8%, because I want you guys to clear this thing so that we cannot face it again. Thank you, Chair. If I miss something, I will come back.
Tsedi.
Thanks, Chairperson, and also to welcome the presentation from the SABC Chair. I want to go back to the license fees issue that was raised by one of the colleagues, but I'm approaching it from a different angle, Chair, just to appreciate the efforts that you are continuing to make with regard to this particular aspect. I think we have raised it in quite a number of occasions, but I appreciate the fact that we have managed to increase the collection by 16.5% from what we've. I think we must commend you for that. The second issue, Chair, it's the issue of the 5% under expenditure, as in the second quarter. The report says 1.8% has been spent, which represents 5%. I'm raising this issue because more often we entities come and appear before the committee and complain about lack of finance. But when you are given money, you don't spend the whole of it. That should be a concern for us as parliamentarians. So I will appreciate if you can as well talk to that particular aspect, because it can't be right that people complain about money not being there, Parliament not being giving people the necessary support, and money end up not being utilized. The second one, Chair, is with relates to the professional and consulting fees. I'm worried about the 31 million that has been reported. And we'll as well appreciate if you can as well try and establish the nature of these professional and consulting services. The report says 79% of the budget with regard to professional consulting fees has been spent as such. That should be a worrying factor. Because we keep on asking ourselves questions from time to time, that if we reach an extent of going to almost 80% utilizing professional and consulting fees, why can't we have permanent people with skills to do some of these things rather than utilizing the services of external people? So I'll appreciate if you can just talk to that particular aspect. I think we have as well raised this particular issue in some of our engagements, where money, a lot of money goes to consultants instead of us getting skilled people, appointing them on a full-time basis to do some of these things. The shareholder complex will appreciate maybe if Deputy Minister he can just clarify if the compacts have been signed with regard to the SABC. Where are we with regard to this particular issue? I know last time when you came, the compact has not yet been signed with SABC. So we'll appreciate if you can just talk to that particular aspect. 4.4 billion irregular expenditure is also a concern. 4.4 billion irregular expenditure. And the report says some of the aspects that led to this particular situation is the issue of payment without contracts. 18.5 million is also a concern. This is one of the issues that led us to the situation, Chairperson, where we had a board being dissolved. These are some of the issues that led us to that situation. Payment without contracts. So I'll appreciate if you can as well talk to particular aspects. The report says 18.5 million has been incurred in that particular aspect, and the last one being the issue of procurement policy not being followed. And we'll as well as appreciate if you can also share with the committee what measures have been taken to people who contributed to this situation. The last one, Chair, is the issue of the listenership of the radio stations. We appreciate on page 8, I think you tried to outline in terms of where we are with regard to the 5 radio stations. But for us to be able to check performance against targets, it's important for us to know what was the target per station in terms of increasing the listenership. I appreciate the slide that talks to the 5 stations, but I think we'll as well know, appreciate to know what has been the target with regard to the rest of the stations of the SABC. The 251 million that you owe Centec, you have raised quite a number of challenges with regard to this particular issue. But I don't see you coming up with a report that says this is how we intend dealing with this particular aspect. So we'll appreciate as well if you can just talk to that issue, Chair. I think for now, let me pause, Chair.
Okay. We're not
Thank you, Chair. Just on few soft issues, Chair, because I want us to finally conclude any matter related to ad hoc committee inquiry. And I know the board, even before you, the interim board, have been actually presenting to us the progress in dealing with those matters which were raised during the inquiry. I know other issues raised, they belong to us in Parliament. But what I will be interested in, if I remember well, you did in our last meeting with the present board, give us an update on how you have dealt with all these irregular contracts. My interest is just if you can just briefly mention to me those which you have already solved. And then on the Deputy Minister, I'm sure, will help us because of these many changes in the portfolio who have also been left hanging when it comes to the issue of the guarantee DM. I think we'll have to interface with you as a committee, you and the minister, even without the department, or just you and the department. On that issue, I think it's more urgent now in view of the presentation here. And I know the board, even the interim board, they have been seized with this issue right from the beginning. So I think we cannot be in a state where we don't know exactly where we stand on this issue between the department and the treasurer. I think it needs to be immediately dealt with. Because you know what worries me is what acting Group CEO you have in your presentation on the readiness for elections and the risks, because it might happen whilst we want you to cover elections, there's no money. And that can't be blamed on you. It must be blamed squarely. That's why I'm raising this as very much urgent. You'll put programs there of education around voter education, but the bulk of the work you have to spend money on production, as you have mentioned. So please assist us, between us and the board and the ministry and the department, so that we push this. But the other, because you know, the Centec issue is coming a long way, and you are not only the culprits. I know in another committee I'm serving is in the TTI. They raise a similar problem. I don't know this disease of government departments not to want to spend to each, but yours is different. I think you are taking for Centec because it's your half brother there. I think we are exploiting them because you are not paying them at all, and they are your colleague. You are, but that money you owe them. It's a lot. I think, and also, that is why it's going to be important in an interface with the postals and telecoms also around the issue. Ministers now, this will, so that we are able to help SABC on that to make sure. And then you, in your presentation around collection of fees, you are mentioning that do you need a legislation around that? Do you need Parliament to legislate around that? So that if Pumzile doesn't pay a license, she knows what is a maximum and minimum penalty on that. So I'm asking this piece because this has been coming, but if you need that, also it must be something which it must be a priority in our program here, so that we assist you around that. The department, I'm sure, will be able to take that down. You have just said to us, presented here on the, we were worried, Mhlekazi. No, once SABC start going back to its old cancer, we were very worried about what is happening on the press. But we're very happy as you are addressing what you are doing there. But can we, chair of the board, begin really to work towards a situation where SABC is not on the news for wrong things? Because that's what kills the image. And I know it's going to, within SABC board staff now, after all what happened, staff feels that at least they are listened to, they can go outside. But there's no organization. If you are not tight on your, I don't say be autocratic, be oppressive. If you are senior management, sorry, for me, I'm a military man. A command is a command. Especially the rules are there. The legislation is there. Use legislation, use regulations which are there when it comes to conduct of staff. It's not a good thing that everybody feel willy-nilly just goes out. They do write to us here. Even here I have an SMS from staff that look in Parliament. They know you are here today. Just send you a WhatsApp or whatever. Why are you not dealing with what is happening to us? All of a sudden we are told that, no, our contracts are ending. So they are referring to what you were explaining to us. Our contracts are just ending in 2 months' time, but we're just told that, no, look, there's no guarantee that will be. But if you deal, I know as a leadership, you deal with the matters as humanly as possible, but don't compromise with the rules and acts and code of conduct, because that is when the organization begins to collapse without any favor to anyone. I think that's what you must be seized with. But Chair, I think the other thing I want to, because sometimes, not in fact, sometimes, every time, I will want first, because this issue of Bamawe and allegations they are raising here around political interference in newsroom. I think if you can just assure us that that is not happening, I wouldn't want to go back to that. Because, see, the problem with that, you accuse us as parties. And we have discovered that now it's not even us as parties. There's some elements who go there, who have friends in the newsroom. They start creating problems there. Then it end up with you and us as parliamentarians. Please deal with that problem. And I know mostly people, they think it's ANC is interfering with the, but these days it's not ANC. I can show you things which have been written to actually by other parties, to those people in your boardroom, in your newsroom, wanting them to do certain things. So please deal with that. But lastly, Chair, I think this thing, if I don't raise it here, which disappoints me a lot, when it have come to my desk, and even a day before yesterday and yesterday, this problem of one presented this thing of this company and the other company around security. Mafoko patrols and what the other one, Mchayeli. If what is written here about the involvement of some of your board members, Chair, I'm telling you, we're going to go back to square one. All the allegations which are here, which are against board members, their involvement. And I don't think an individual can write such damning allegations and knowing very well that the person, the individual is lying. Because this one, if I was these people who are mentioned here, because it's just written down. It's written down, here's the letters. It's written down. If they know that is not true, because this is tantamount to, discrediting a person or damaging the reputation of a, please, I will want the chair, the board to come to us. This is involved. Give a report to the ministry and we get this ministry. DM, we want to get to the bottom of this problem. Again, it's around tenders, contracts, monies. This is the issue which we should be seized with it immediately. Because once we ignore it, Chair, we say, no, it's writing. And then, in fact, they will need an explanation from the board and the ministry to come back to you and explain the validity because we are going to call, I propose, we'll call these people who are written here, Chair, who have written here, and talk to us about this. There's no way that we can live. Well, not at a time when we were coming out of SABC with all these problems and involvement of senior people, right from CEO, COO, and even board members, previous board, in contracts and awarding of contracts. We can't allow and now and pretend when this is surfacing. It's very disappointing to say the fact. I'm really, if this is true, I'm really disappointed of the individuals which are mentioned here, which you have worked with throughout. But Chair, we must get to the bottom of this. We're not concluding anything, it's allegations. Let's meet, because once they are whistleblowers, it's our duty as parliamentarians to call them and get to the bottom of the issue, so that we are not accused of ignoring what the public have seen. We can't allow SABC to go back to that nonsense. So, Chair, I wanted to raise this so that it's recorded, we deal with it immediately.
Yeah, agreed. We'll have to do that. We'll have to meet those people. But before the response, we have another entity. Before the response, if you want the company or the organization to operate smoothly, ensure that there is a go-between between you and the workers, a representative of the workers, nothing else but the union. Because if there are problems with anything relating to workers, unions will raise with management. Ensure that that is happening. I'm not sure. There is BIMAO, there is MWASA, there is everything. So that you can have an engagement with the union, it stabilizes the work environment. That's one thing. I think that must be done as soon as possible between the SABC and the unions. To agree with Honorable Kalako, if there is anybody politically interfering with what is happening, because there is no mandate like that from any political organization. that this must be said, this must not be said. I think it's your responsibility, Board Chair, with your executive, to raise it sharply with that particular organization, whether it's the ruling party, whether it's opposition, because the reason why things have gone to where we were last year or from 2016 is precisely because of those issues. And as the committee will not accept anything like that anymore. We have come a long way with SABC. Let SABC be the national broadcaster, no political interference. I think this is what the committee is saying. Report that so that we can, the organization, the political organizations can deal with those particular individuals. I'll hand over to you because we have up to you see we have ICASA, and we're starting at 2 in the House. The latest we can go is 1:30. So with SABC we'll go to 12:15. And then after that, we can take ICASA, Fandam and Machoba.
Chair, bearing in the fact that we still have to deal with the ICASA, I'm sure you're not going to allow a second round. So I forgot just 2 questions, if I can ask with your indulgence quickly.
That is the second round.
I'm still asking in the first round. Okay, so the issue of vetting of journalists. I'm entirely uncomfortable with it. It harks back to apartheid, where journalists were put under the thumb of not only the SABC but the government. It harks back to the past era of the SABC, where the SIU was bugging offices, where emails were read, where phones were tapped. So I am entirely uncomfortable with the vetting of journalists. So if you're speaking about vetting of journalists, can you explain what that means? And then there was one question that I asked about advertising relating to the ANC Congress. And the reply was that there was no revenue generated from that. But I seem to recall specifically seeing adverts of various candidates of the ANC Congress on TV. So were those spaces given for free? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point I missed is in page 7. There's these programs of Uzalo and Generation. What is the duration in terms of the contract in these programs? I'm just asking this, Chair, for the benefit of the nation, so that they can know. Thanks, sir.
All right, Deputy Minister, and your team.
No, Chair, I think...
Sorry, there is tea and coffee.
Chair, I think on the day-to-day running of the SABC, including the many questions that members have asked, I will ask the chairperson of the board and the group CEO just to deal with some of those things. But safe to say, Chair, on the issue of the guarantee by National Treasury, this is one of the commitments that the minister did in our first engagement with the SABC to say we will work as the department very closely with the SABC and secure a meeting with the Minister of Finance so that we are able to present the situation of the SABC, mindful of the challenges and the unintended consequences that if this intervention is not done, there may be challenges going forward, including the issue of elections and all other things. So we are hands-on in terms of that. There was supposed to be a meeting by this week. Minister was going to, but this disruption of the family challenges, something unforeseen, took the process a bit back. So it's something that the minister will deal with immediately. The shareholders compact, Chair, it has been signed. All we'll need to do is to make sure that all what has been agreed upon is followed through. We make sure that all the things are followed and so on and so on. So I'm just saying those are some of the things that will be hands-on as the shareholder on some of the things. But the call we're making, it's exactly what the committee is making. If there's an outcry, if there's a challenge within the entity, let's move swiftly in addressing some of these things, whether it's lower staff, whether it's whatever, including what the whip of the committee has picked up, Mr. Kalaku. We picked up that thing yesterday of the security services. We are very interested in making sure that the board...
So we're going to leave it there, the parliamentary proceedings, SABC executives appearing before Parliament, answering difficult questions around issues such as the petition that 116 SABC staffers signed, new recruits in the radio space, as well as TV license model. How well is that working? We'll bring you a little bit of a summary of that in the midday report. Time for a short break.